Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk about a super important topic, and that is on how eating, how your diet can impact fertility. It can make an impact on boosting fertility and even dealing with issues like infertility, second infertility even. So we're really going to be diving into this topic today with a friend and colleague who's an expert in this area. Her name is Elizabeth Shaw, and I'm really excited that she's here today. Hi, Liz. How are you today?
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. Liz is an expert in this area, in infertility and also balancing family, healthy, delicious eating and meals. So we're really excited that she can join us to talk more about some of the issues, some of the questions we have about fertility and diet. Liz also just wrote a book called Instant Pot Cookbook for Dummies. So that's exciting. And we'll be sharing some of her favorite information in the blog that goes with this interview. So check it out at SharonPalmer.com, SharonPalmer.com, and you'll find the blog and all of the information that Liz has on healthy nutrition for families and nutrition for fertility. So I wanted to dive into this topic with you, Liz, but first I thought you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you became interested in this area of nutrition.
Yes, so I've been, flash forward, or rewind, I guess, many years. I wanted to be a dietitian since I was a young teenager. So when I was 13 years old, I actually sought nutrition knowledge from a dietitian when I was struggling with an eating disorder. So having that base at such a young age really inspired me to know that that's what I wanted to do with my life, that I wanted to help people understand how food is fuel. It's a form of medicine for their body. So, flash forward over 2 decades now, and I'm able to work daily with the field I love, with the knowledge that I'm so blessed to have gained through my education, and really with the fundamentals that nutrition has so much more power than we've ever learned in school, than, healthcare professionals actually give it credit. So, when I was, the reason I actually became so interested in fertility is that when I was struggling to get pregnant, I tried to go find the book that I ended up writing was, what foods actually can help affect those struggling with infertility. And so I knew there was a lot of information out there about, pregnancy, prenatal diets, postpartum, but not so much on, well, what happens when you've tried for 3 months and you can't get pregnant, So that was really something that made me go back to the books, made me start researching and really find how can food affect fertility. And, it was such a strange time in my life, but also such a blessed time in my life, because since writing this book over almost 5 years ago, when the book finally came to life, was such a gift to so many women and men struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm sure you interacted with lots of people, one-on-one in terms of nutrition and giving them guidance when it comes to fertility. Yeah.
Yes. And so, when I feel like there's so many, 5 years ago, there were very few dietitians specializing in fertility, preconception. But over the last, I want to say 3 years, the amount of dietitians who have taken a specific emphasis on fertility has been incredible. I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell you how many colleagues I've connected with since then. And, so many of them have actually specialized in certain areas. I have two really good friends who specialize in PCOS, and one who specializes specifically in male infertility. And so I feel like the world of fertility is so vast that we really do need to almost separate it now and have those go-to experts, because I would say that my go-to specialization when it comes to infertility is those going through in vitro fertilization. So really that is something so specialized and also so personal, so vulnerable, that I really, because I did go through that process myself, I can relate to my clients on a different level with that.
Yeah, you're right. Nutrition has gotten so specified, and you really have to, just dive into the research to understand these areas. So I really admire what you're doing and how many people you've helped, in this really important part of people's lives. And that brings me to my first big question, and that is, what are these connections? What do we know right now when it comes to the connections between nutrition and fertility? What is out there that you feel really good about that nutrition information?
Yes. So I will say, I always like to, I want to start with a positive that we do know there is a strong connection with the types of foods that you feed your body are going to make you more, I want to say more susceptible to conception. Okay. Now we do know there are certain disease conditions that it doesn't matter what foods you eat, there's still going to be very strong kind of obstacles you have to overcome in order to get pregnant. Some of them relate to how your uterus is formed, so how a female actually can hold and carry a baby. Some of them relate to hormonal conditions such as PCOS or even endometriosis, how our uterine lining is building up. Other conditions are specifically related to the male, and does he have sperm mobility issues? So there are so many things that, while nutrition can make you more favorable for conception, it might not necessarily allow you to see those two pink lines overnight. So basically, there's no superfood that is going to make you pregnant. Now, you check Google, there are so many cleanses, detoxes, everything, and I think that's one of the main reasons that inspired me was to write this book and really dive so much into the research, because I knew it doesn't matter how much celery juice you want to drink, it's not going to make you pregnant, and we need to come out with those facts. Pineapple is a great source of so many important nutrients, but eating pineapple doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a baby, and I think that that's something that we so often see online, that we need to kind of fight through these fads and talk about the facts when it comes to fertility. Now, with that said, there's a strong connection with walnuts and the type of fat in walnuts and how it can actually promote sperm health and promote the fertility with men. And so when we look at that and look at those kind of specific food groups, it's really encouraging. I can't tell someone, go have, go enjoy walnuts and not feel any guilt about that, because walnuts are a great food. Whether they make them pregnant or not, we know it's going to help them in the long term with their long-term health. So when I sit down one-on-one with a client and they say to me, I read this online, or my doctor mentioned this, I always say to them, we are in a situation, if you're struggling with infertility, that you are so looking for anything you can control, because this situation is so out of your control. So what is the one thing that you can kind of take back and take charge of? It's what you're feeding your body. And so if anything, focusing on nutrition for fertility is a form of empowerment. It's a form of giving yourself that little bit of hope that you might feel so lost in right now.
Yeah, those are all such important points. And especially when you talk about all these magic bullets that are out there, you mentioned a few of them, even though, like you said, walnuts, that's one particular food that we do have nutrition science on. But then there's just so much misinformation out there. So it's really important for you to set people straight, so that they're not being misinformed, and they can make better choices that could perhaps impact their fertility. So that's really good. So I wanted to also ask you a little bit about whether it's different when you're looking at infertility. Is secondary infertility a different situation? If somebody can get pregnant the first time and then they're experiencing infertility later on, how would we deal with that in terms of nutrition?
So the interesting thing is whether someone's struggling with primary infertility or secondary infertility, the nutrition guidelines aren't going to change drastically at all, because really what you're trying to do is provide your body with those antioxidants that are going to basically help rid your body of those free radicals that are causing some kind of altercation in your body that's not allowing you to conceive, to get pregnant again. But the other thing is that now you have a little one potentially at home that is also making it more challenging for you to eat right, maybe fit your fitness in. Maybe you're having a couple more cups of coffee a day just because you didn't get a good night's sleep. So we know sleep plays a big role, lifestyle. So all of these things I think are a little bit more, I don't want to say challenging, but they're more apparent to address, usually with secondary infertility. Now, one of the biggest things I think I get, actually, I just had a client texting me this morning about coffee. She's like, Liz, I'm now on the IVF route. We've tried for 3 rounds of IUIs. Tell me what I need to do about my coffee. And I knew already she was only having a 6-ounce cup of a half calf. So it was already naturally lower in caffeine. And I said, look, the research out there shows that you can actually have a very moderate amount of caffeine because it's so inconclusive. Oftentimes we hear, don't drink caffeine if you're trying to get pregnant. But realistically, if someone's having a cup of decaf a day and that provides them almost a form of stress relief, stress is a big culprit. Cortisol is a big culprit with infertility. And so if that one cup makes them a little bit more relaxed, I'm not going to take that away from them. I'm going to focus on, yes, let's have a decaf. But I think that that's where we become so extreme, and it creates more of this stress-induced lifestyle that we hear, you know, you're trying to get pregnant, you can't drink, you can't eat seafood. Like you can, well, yes, you should eat seafood. Maybe we should look at the types of seafood we're eating. But I think that that's something that's so often misconstrued in the media, that when I see clients who are struggling with trying to get pregnant again, that we have to look at the entire lifestyle, and we have to talk about one's sanity and stress management as a higher priority than someone maybe who doesn't have a little one running around at home. And it's not saying one situation is easier than the other. Absolutely not. But when someone's trying to conceive for their first and they're struggling, they're more likely to be able to give up certain things because they have maybe a little bit better sleep and those kind of factors that come into play.
Mm-hmm. That's really important what you were talking about, especially when we think about stress, you know, and how that's part of this, an important part of this whole scenario as well, and how it can change when you already have a little one in the picture. So those are really great points. And I also wanted to ask your opinion about how nutrition for fertility differs between genders. For example, the mother and father. Are there different strategies for the different genders? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So there's certain nutrient groups that we might suggest depending on whether it's a female infertility problem or a male infertility problem, or both. So for instance, some research has shown that low-fat dairy for males can actually help with male infertility. So if it is a male-induced struggle with trying to conceive, we might look at certain things like that. Whereas women who struggle with an ovulatory infertility, actually whole milk is recommended. Now, I often get this question, you know, well, I have PCOS. Should I even be drinking dairy? Should I even be consuming dairy? Well, maybe not. Everyone is so individualized, and that's the thing. So even though dairy has kind of been given this hit or miss, like if you like Greek yogurt and you want to eat Greek yogurt and you're struggling to get pregnant and you're a female, why not try whole? Yes, it's going to be higher in saturated fat, higher in calories. So we need to balance things throughout the day. But if you enjoy that and it's not causing inflammation in your body, it's filled with great nutrition. Now, on the flip side, if you know dairy is kind of giving you some GI distress, maybe you're lactose intolerant or you think you might be, well, there are plenty of other ways, as you know, that we can get calcium, we can get vitamin D in our bodies. So we just kind of educate on those kind of things so it's not a one way or the highway. What we do know from recent research is actually more fruits, more vegetables, produce consumption reigns supreme when it comes to fertility, both male and female fertility. Now, there's a lot of discussion around, should I drink or should I buy organic? Should I buy conventional? Well, at the end of the day, most Americans still aren't eating enough produce. So if it comes down to buying an organic apple or a conventional apple, and you can only afford on a routine basis the conventional apple, then buy the conventional, wash it, because that will still help reduce pesticide residues on there. But long-term, it's about more inclusion of produce rather than eliminating it because you're fearful of the pesticides on there. Mm-hmm. Now, certain disease conditions, specifically with PCOS or hormonal conditions, then if you can afford it, absolutely, why not buy organic? But I think one of the strongest messages that I've tried to communicate to clients and my followers is just buy the produce, because we know research is showing people were actually quicker to get pregnant when they had less fast food consumption and more fruit consumption. So that's recent data out of the last 3 years. So lowering our intake of processed foods, those deemed processed foods, and increasing our fruits and vegetables is going to be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really a key, to getting more of those fruits and vegetables in, which reduces oxidative stress, inflammation, which you've
Yes.
mentioned. And that really brings me to one of my big questions is what are those foods that people should be eating to boost fertility? And you already talked about some particular foods like walnuts, and you talked about fruits and vegetables. Are there any other foods or nutrients that people should really prioritize?
So we definitely want to think about the antioxidants. So when we talk about fruits and vegetables, if we want to get specific, we know strawberries, we know berries, blueberries, even the wild form have so many important antioxidants. Then we have to talk about healthy fats because we know fat plays a crucial role not only in fetal development and brain development, but also in supporting mood of the mother. So omega-3s come into play. So for someone who enjoys seafood, definitely hit that twice a week seafood recommendation. For someone who lives a vegetarian lifestyle and doesn't necessarily want to eat fish, there are so many other ways. So you can look at supplements, which are not a bad thing, but we know a food first standpoint is going to be really helpful. So you can look at flaxseed, you can look at, again, the walnuts, chia seeds, some other forms that will still help you get that nutrition in. Avocados. So avocados not only have the healthy fat, but folate too. Eggs are another area that I always talk about because choline has been so associated with fetal development and also mood and metabolism that 9 out of 10 Americans aren't eating enough choline. So whether they're eating red meat, whether they're eating seafood, chicken, pork, Brussels sprouts, lima beans, all of these foods, they don't necessarily, if you Google them, say fertility boosting food, but they do absolutely support fertility. And I think that's something we have to look at. It's supporting your fertility, but it's supporting your lifelong health. And so when someone comes to me and like they're expecting after a 6-week program to get pregnant, I say, we can never promise that. We know that there's bigger powers at play here, but I can promise you after 6 weeks with me, you are going to feel healthier. You're going to feel more motivated and more in control. And I think that that's what we seek so much on this journey.
Yeah. And I really love what you said, that these are things that are going to make you feel better, because you're describing a healthy diet for everybody. That's a healthy diet for your heart, your brain, to avoid diabetes. And, in the nutrition world, as you know, most of these things line up very nicely, that what's good for one thing is good for your whole body. So,
That's
and
the thing.
it's really interesting that all of these really potent fruits and vegetables are so high in these actions, like the antioxidant action, and that we should all be including more of these in our diets.
Yes, and even the grain category. So, gluten-free often gets associated quite frequently. Like if you're struggling with infertility, you need to go on a gluten-free diet. Well, not necessarily. Unless you're having an inflammatory response in your body and gluten is causing that, making it harder to conceive because you have this inflammation, there's absolutely no reason to cut out gluten, whole grains. So for someone who might have been tested for celiac but came back negative and they're still experiencing some GI distress, well, then absolutely. We can do a gluten sensitive test and obviously reduce gluten, talk about other healthy whole grains. So quinoa, amaranth, a lot of these other things. And I think, even research has shown women who actually consumed more whole grains had a thicker lining when they were going through IVF, so making it more successful for implantation. So if we think about these things, then it's not necessarily eliminating one food group. It's about finding which foods specifically work best for you and your body, because we know everyone is so individualized with how they respond to certain nutrients.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great point about all of these healthful foods and, individual responses. So are there any foods, you already mentioned this a little bit, are there any foods that people should avoid? We're talking about all the things they should be eating, but other things that they should look at kind of trimming from their diets.
Yes. So one of the things that you want to be mindful of is added sugar. So we know heard that from the dietary guidelines for Americans: reduce added sugars, keep it no more than 10% of your total calories. Well, that's for a healthy life, but it's also conducive for your fertility too. So if you're finding yourself relying on, seeking comfort in ice cream and things like that, because, maybe you saw another negative or your period came again and you're just so frustrated, well, that's natural. That's a comfort mechanism. But if we can focus on maybe finding other healthful ways to look at lifestyle modifications, reducing our added sugar, reducing the amount of saturated fat from or trans fat even too, from processed foods like donuts and those cookies that are packaged and things like that. Like, not that they're a bad food, but we have to look at minimizing our intakes. And so part of the reason I wrote a fertility foods cookbook was because I wanted to show them how they could still enjoy their cookie or their slice of banana bread, but have it with a little bit more nutrition boosted within that recipe.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. So if you were to just kind of give us like a overall picture perfect diet, for fertility for men and women, just, broad strokes, what would that look like?
So I'm just going to go for someone. Let's talk about someone who's vegetarian, because they can make obviously modifications if they're vegan or if they want to add a little bit of animal protein. So starting with breakfast, I would recommend a veggie packed omelet. So have 2 eggs, use the yolk in there because that's where most of the nutrients are in, and then throw it in with some mushrooms. Mushrooms have some great research associated with fertility. There's selenium content. So vitamin D, we know in there. Tomatoes actually, if they're cooked, actually have higher lycopene. And I know you're the tomato guru too. So, there's so much power in there. So if you think about that, serving it with some sliced avocado on top, and whether some grapes on the side, or if you want to have a slice of whole grain toast, picture perfect breakfast right there. You look into lunch. If you want to have something like, I love lentils. They're so easy to make too. So if you want to have some lentil tacos with some crushed walnuts on it, throw in some bell peppers, things like that, putting it in, if you're watching your carbs, because I know certain people with PCOS do have a moderate carb intake, you can put it in lettuce leaves, or you can use corn tortillas, whatever you prefer. So really simple, really easy to prepare, but also really delicious, because nutrition should be delicious. It shouldn't be boring chicken and broccoli, So I think that that's the message I want to get to clients. And especially if someone's struggling with secondary infertility, having a build your own taco bar for lunch is something that your kids at home can also get involved in too. So it's not any more stress for you to prepare your fertility fueling lunch. It's something that you can get your current kids involved with and also feel really good about nourishing your body with.
Mm-hmm.
And then for snacks, because I'm a snacker, I know a lot. Thank you. So I know I'm a snacker. One thing that I love recommending, because we do know that fruits and vegetables, so making your own hummus at home and having like whether it's a peanut butter hummus and it's a little bit more sweet and serving that with strawberries, or having more of a savory hummus with a little bit of maybe roasted bell peppers in there and serving it with carrot chips. So you can make really fun carrot chips in the air fryer, or even just buying them already prepared at the store that are sliced for you. Very simple snacks that don't have to be laborious in the kitchen and are really nutrient dense.
That sounds so great. You're just describing this beautiful, colorful, delicious diet, that's healthy for everybody, but I can see that that's just packed with nutrients, packed with all those antioxidant compounds. So it's really great. Now, if somebody wanted to find some of your recipes and your tips, where would they find those? In addition to your book, can you tell us the name of that again?
Yeah, so I have my first book was the Fertility Foods Cookbook. I actually have it right here. I'm going to point it out. So I co-authored it with Sarah Haas, another fellow dietitian and chef, and it just is our labor of love. We want to get people encouraged, but so many of recipes in that book are actually available on my website. So I have a healthy recipe blog that, although it's for families, for fun, it's also very conducive to fertility too. So that is at my website, shawsimpleswaps.com. But part of the reason I know you alluded to this in the beginning was I wanted to create more recipes for people who maybe have seen their 2 pink lines, have started families, and maybe want to have more kids, maybe just want to continue leading that healthy life, which is part of the reason I wrote the Instapot cookbook and the air fryer cookbook, because I wanted to bring nutrition into fun, trendy, functional appliances that could be very applicable for family building and healthy living overall.
That's great. I love my Instant Pot. I use it all the time. I have some of my favorite recipes, and I just can't make rice without it now, and all the whole grains and soups. Yeah. It's really great for plant-based cooking in particular. So
yes, I
can't wait to try some of your recipes.
Yes, and it's a great way to try different, get your family exposed to different flavors. We have a lot of Indian inspired recipes in the book that are just So simple. They're all vegan and just delicious. So what I like to tell clients who are, using this book as a supplement to their nutrition program for trying to conceive for baby number 2 or 3 is get your little kids involved with this, because how exciting is that for them to help make a chana masala for dinner, and you're making your homemade naan bread on the counter, and just it's such a family affair that whether you're trying for baby number 1 or baby number 4, or just trying to put food on the table for you and your husband, they're just fun recipes that are very nourishing.
Oh, that's great. And it's so important also to introduce young palates to all these flavors. We have research that shows if children try these new things early on, they'll be more apt to accept them and eat more healthfully as they get older and reduce their risks of chronic diseases. So it's
Yes.
a total win-win all the way around.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is that when you start this in utero, actually, there's a really cool study. I'm sure you've read it about the carrot juice. When moms drink the carrot juice in utero and the babies were exposed to that same flavor during their weaning period of breastfeeding, they showed more favorable facial expressions, meaning like they obviously were more familiar with that taste, more inclined to eat the carrots than babies maybe who didn't have as much flavor exposure in utero.
Wow. I know. I love that we're,
Yeah.
we're learning so much more about how nutrition impacts, before the fetus all the way through, a generation to come even. It's so fascinating. Nutrition is so powerful, and it's so exciting to be part of this field, isn't it?
It is. And one of the big like aha moments was, I was actually sharing this with my mom, who has no science background, but just is so fascinated by so much of this. And I'm like, when you're born, when you're a girl who's born, you're all of your eggs are already inside your body. So like technically your grandma kind of carried you too for a minute, because you're born with all of your reproduction. So it's just, all of us are playing such a strong role in how we nourish our bodies is truly nourishing future generations.
Exactly. It's so powerful. And, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your tips for stress. You mentioned, how important stress is too, because of course, all these nutrition things are really important, and there's a lot that we can do with our eating style and the foods that we're putting on our plate every day. But how can we manage stress to help maximize fertility in that way?
So I think one of the most important things is finding what works for you, because I know when I was struggling with infertility is that I needed to have some kind of fitness outlet. So a lot of it was power walking, a lot of it was maybe some cardio, kickboxing, a light, moderate movement. That worked for me, and that was very stress relieving. Now I have some clients, especially those who struggle with hyperactivity or have such a strong emphasis on exercise that we need to reduce it, that we need to find other mechanisms. So actually, the adult coloring books have proved to be very successful in lowering stress response. So I think it's going to look so individualized for each person. Therapy, I cannot tell you how much I recommend the multidisciplinary approach to treating infertility, because it is a World Health Organization diagnosed disease. So just like we would recommend someone who's struggling with postpartum depression to see a therapist, we should absolutely be seeing a therapist if we feel like we need extra support during our fertility journeys, because they can provide different coping and stress response mechanisms that, frankly, we just aren't trained in as dietitians, and they can help you work through things. So I highly recommend finding that support system that really works well for your particular needs.
That's great. It really is a holistic approach, and I'm glad that you are focusing on that too. And it's so individual. We all have our ways that we manage stress well, and we need to tap into those ways. And that applies to life overall, doesn't it? It's for all of
Absolutely.
our stressful activities and maintaining optimal health, reducing our risks of disease is so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's I always say, we learned about it in school, but nutrition is so multidisciplinary. We can't fix one part without fixing the other part. It's got to be this circle.
Yeah. Well, this has been so great. Thank you so much, Liz. This has been such great information. I'm going to be sharing a lot of the great tips that Elizabeth shared with us, and I'll be sharing her links, more information about her books. So please check it out at my blog at SharonPalmer.com. Thanks for joining us today, and remember to eat and live well.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Elizabeth.